Welcome to this next episode of Fascia Friday. In this episode, we're going to look at our muscle and fascia continuum, which is a very easy and subjective way to bucket athletes based off their superpower. We're then going to look at the current state of strength and conditioning. And finally, we're going to finish with a force plate assessment, or drop landings, which is one of many tests we look at to be able to effectively bucket athletes based on if they're a muscle-based mover, a fascial-based mover, and how we can assess this and also track progress over time. Our athlete continuum, which is a very easy, subjective way to bucket athletes. When you're working with a team, when you're working with individual clients, this to me is the first step in the individualization piece to their training. And actually, I think it's probably the easiest as well. If we look at these three buckets, muscle, hybrid, and fascial, and you'll see the players in the pictures, it becomes all of a sudden very clear how we bucket and why we need to bucket. If we take, for example, the more muscle-based athletes, Steven Adam, Lopez, various other big men in the NBA, various big men in college basketball, they are the more traditionally strong athletes. They are very muscle-bound, as you can see in the photos. They have what we would call traditional strength. Bench press, deadlift, squat. They would probably enjoy the weight room more than the hybrid and fascial-based athletes. They are the traditional bigs. And this can apply in football, O-line, D-line, it can be shot putters. The muscle category here is pretty straightforward, I feel like. The fascial-based athletes, if we look here, we've got Jar, KD, obviously Wemby as well, Chet. They are still very athletic. How are they able to play in the NBA? How are they able to do these things without being traditionally strong? They have an extremely strong fascial system, connective tissue system. They are plyometrically, that is their superpower, unbelievable. They do not have the traditional strength we see. Obviously, famous story with KD and 0 reps at 185 bench press. They would probably enjoy skill workouts more than the weight room. This to me is more of our guards, our leaner athletes, our smaller athletes, our low in body fat percentage athletes. Their fascial system is their superpower. You have your hybrids. Look at Giannis, you look at Jimmy Butler, you could put LeBron in there. Put a whole host of the best NBA players. I'd say Russell Westbrook is in there as well. These are the best of both. These are what you would see typically as being the most athletic. They have the right mix of being muscle bound. They are obviously strong to look at, and they are also physically strong in the post, in their basketball movements. Yet they are not slow. They are quick. They have great plyometric ability. These to me would be more of our wings. And again, to really simplify this, if we're looking at a basketball team, and you're looking at this is in the 1990s, even to this day, you are going to have more guards that are going to be more fascial based, less muscle bound. You're going to have bigs that are going to be big. That is why they are in that position in the first place. However, the game is changing, as we've seen with Chet and Wemby, and more mobile bigs. And then you have your hybrids. For me, the hybrids rule supreme. For me, with what we do, I'm trying to take a fascial based athlete. I'm trying to keep that superpower, but I'm also trying to add muscle mass to them without slowing them down. And that is where the force plate tests and data over the last 3 years have really helped me to refine that. There's a communication with the athlete as well. Hey, do you feel like you're putting on too much size? Do you feel like you're going slower? No, coach, I feel great. Perfect. They still need to withstand the rigors of a college basketball season. They still need to be strong in the post through ball screens. That is where the muscle component comes in and the more traditional training comes in. And if you have a big man that is very typically big and muscle bound, they need to move better. They need to have more of an emphasis on their fascial system. They need to have more open chain movements. They need to have a proprioceptive element to their training. They need to have a combination of exercises in order to tap into that fascial system. And as we'll see from the last slide here, they need to improve their time to stabilization. They need to improve that piece of their game to be able to play with balance, to move better in multiple planes of motion with speed, because that is what the game demands now more than ever. Now, if we look at the current state of strength and conditioning, I feel like we really love and emphasize the traditional strength model. Bench press, squat, deadlift, clean. We chase 1RMs. We want our athletes to, he improved his 1RM by 20 pounds. He gained this amount of muscle mass. For me, the continuum here is probably 80% of the focus right now in college sport. It's bigger, faster, stronger. Hypertrophy is king. You've then got the functional training side that you will probably see on social media. All balance, no load, doing squats on a BOSU ball, not adding any of the high force component needed for any effective strength conditioning program. The more apparatus used, the better. They are combining different apparatus. They are Aquabag and Weight Vest and Bosu Ball and Viper. And really the load isn't there. This is probably what some people think fascial-based training is. On the right-hand side here, we've got an equal balance of contractile and connective tissue work. So in your A series, you're going to have that more traditional lifting. You might have the deadlift, the incline bench. But in the accessory work, that's where the magic happens. That's where if you've done a bench press, do you really need to do another horizontal press? Can you do a cable chest press with rotation, with speed, in a forward lunge position? That's an example of an open chain exercise where balance and proprioception is needed. The sensory motor aspect of fascial-based training. The closed chain obviously being where you have solid body points on the ground or bench. Fixed positions. Open chain being very much more sport-like, more chaotic, more of the proprioceptive element, more of the sensory motor element, which in our eyes has a greater transfer of training to sport, which is inherently chaos. So how in the weight room can you dose some elements of chaos where the body has to self-organize, where the body has to go through the proprioceptive element, where it's unstable, it's offset loading, there's different force vectors, there's different ranges of motion, there's different planes of motion you're going through the exercise with. That to us is the more optimal viewpoint of strength and conditioning. The mix of the traditional and the fascial, not just the gimmicky social media, not just the straight bench press, straight hypertrophy, but finding that optimal blend of both. If we look at drop landings and we look at force plate assessments, there are various force plate assessments that can look at fast or slow stretch shortening cycle tests. A counter movement jump would typically be on the slow stretch shortening cycle, as it's only that one downward movement and not a repeated jump, really not involving any plyometric component. If you look at a multi-rebound test, if you look at a drop jump, these are more of your fascial-based tests, which we'll go through in our course. One of the tests that's been a big area of focus for us this summer has been the drop landings. It's shown incredibly high peak force, 10 to 14 times body weight. We're looking at 10,000 to 12,000 newtons of force, but also, and perhaps more importantly, is the dynamic stabilization component. With the Hawkin Dynamics force plates, it gives you a peak force. It also gives you this beautiful number, the time to stabilization number. As we can see, going back to that continuum, we're looking at hybrids, which to me are our best athletes. They have the perfect blend between being fascial dominant, muscle dominant. They have both of those attributes. They are strong. They look strong. The typical look of muscle-based athletes, they look strong, and they are high-performing, high-force athlete, exceptional with plyometric ability, single leg and double leg. They're my hybrids. As we can see with the time to stabilization, that number is extremely low. When you're landing from 54 inches on a box, to be able to stabilize in essentially 120 to 160 milliseconds is elite. We also look at our more muscle dominant athletes, which are going to be high on that time to stabilization piece. 270, anywhere between 270 and, as you can see on the graph on the right, 500 milliseconds. It takes them longer to stabilize. Their muscle contractile system is super strong. Their connective tissue system, their fascial system, their proprioception element, the sensory motor element isn't as strong. And as we can see with this test, it's a great way to bucket those athletes. As we look at the second point, how can we use this data to bucket our athletes and program for them optimally? If you do this test, you will see a clear difference between your fascial, hybrid, and muscle dominant athletes. But here's the great thing about it. As you can see on the chart on the right, since we started doing them in June with this particular muscle dominant athlete, his time to stabilization has dramatically improved. It is essentially more than halved. The beauty of this is, as I see him land, I now don't see that real knee bend, that real hip drop. I can see him stick that position. I can see him use his body better. He has a greater awareness of his body in space. He's able to apply the brakes effectively. In probably the greatest light bulb moment of my career so far, it's no surprise to me now that seeing from June to now, that time to stabilization has improved. It has decreased as a result of doing less contractile tissue work, less bench pressing, less traditional lifting, and working more of that fascia, getting into the fascial system with speed, with different ranges of motion, with different vectors, with different apparatus, with combining exercises, the use of landmines, with the use of cables, with the use of anchors, and really exposing this athlete to something that he's not good at. He was not good at stabilizing. He was not good at balancing. He could press in a closed chain all day long, and in fact loved to do that. But in order to make him a better basketball player, in order to make him move better and move quicker and jump higher, we had to change his plan, and we went to the more fascial-based work in the A and the B series for this athlete. It's no surprise that his force plate numbers are now through the roof. His jump height is better. His time to take off is quicker. His time of stabilization is better. One of the best things we have about our force plates is 3 years worth of data. And I can tell, looking back on my athletes, how I wish I would have trained them this way years ago. And I say that to them now when I see them. But how grateful I am to have trained these more muscle-dominant athletes to be more fascial-based, to have improvements in their fascial system, as we know the importance of that system and the importance of it with movement and with speed and in the game of basketball. It is our goal of this course to show you various tests, both quantifiable data with force plates, subjective analysis with pictures, with comments, with case studies, to show you how you can better train and more optimally train those athletes on the continuum, how you can keep a muscle dominance athlete's superpower, but how you can bring up his weaknesses, how you can improve his movement, how you can improve his plyometric ability by training the fascial system more, and how for a fascial-based athlete, you can improve their muscle capacity, you can improve their strength, you can improve their ability to play the sport for longer and be more robust, and be less likely to have soft tissue injuries. Because as we know, if the tendon is overloaded and the fascia system is optimal, but the muscles aren't, that is also a cause for concern and a risk for injury. This is just one of the tests we've used to be able to bucket our athletes based off their results. And hopefully we'll be able to rebucket athletes based on their current results, as opposed to their pre-test, looking at their post-test and how they've improved, and giving the athlete this feedback has been incredible so far for our players. And they understand the rationale why they're doing exercises, and they can see and feel the improvements in their performance.